For more on energy leapfrogging in Africa and the latest developments in renewable energy, my colleague Rachelle Akuffo spoke with energy and environment writer Jeffrey Ball. He's also a scholar in residence at Stanford University. She began by asking him about the possible fallout of the practice.
This is the central dilemma. On the one hand, a desire for cleaner energy, a desire to avoid, as it were, some of the mistakes that the developed world has made in producing energy in a pretty dirty way. And on the other hand, a desire to continue economic growth and indeed to increase economic growth. I mean, Africa is growing at quite a clip. Expectations are that that's going to continue, and no one in Africa and I would imagine elsewhere in the world as well wants that clip to decline markedly. And so the question is, how do you produce cleaner energy in a place like Africa, but also reliable energy that keeps economic growth occurring? And so there are a number of things that the world needs to keep in mind in doing that well.
Now, one thing that continues to be an issue, something that I've personally experienced being from Ghana, we know that the World Bank estimates that electricity shortages across sub-Saharan Africa are holding back economic growth by about 4% a year. Is this energy leapfrogging a way to perhaps tackle that, or is there a better strategy?
If you can muster a new source of electricity, in this case, let's say solar, you can absolutely address the problems with insufficient electricity during a large part of the day. Again, the challenge is to do that in a way that is economic, and that's frankly easier and easier to do because a technology like solar is coming down in cost so quickly, and so many people are working to address questions like how do you store that solar energy when the sun is not shining, and how do you transmit that energy from the places where the sun shines to the population centers in the case where you're using solar, for instance, in big ground-mounted farms rather than putting solar panels on the roofs of buildings. So the reality is there are technical questions that remain, but lots and lots of progress on fixing these technical problems.
And having that consistent source of energy certainly would be welcome news for everyday citizens, and especially for businesses who may be relying on it. So what sort of partnerships are we seeing then with the private sector when it comes to energy leapfrogging?
Well, look, if this were to happen in Africa or in other parts of the world that are in bad need of more electricity, it absolutely will happen only with partnership between private companies and governments. Almost any study one looks at talks about the fact that private investment in cleaning up the energy system will vastly outweigh public investment. So a lot of people talk a lot about government investment, but really I think the smart way to think about government investment is as a catalyst for private investment.
And we know that leapfrogging is primarily seen as this process to really help with energy distribution. Are there any other potential uses that you could see it could really have more applications for?
Well, I mean, you know, one classic example of leapfrogging is telephones. So parts of the world in Africa is a really good example that didn't have massive telephone infrastructure in much of the continent, now have people who communicate by cell phones. And it's not just Africa, it's many, many other places around the world. So that's sort of the example that many people point to as the grand possibility for technological leapfrogging.